coffee, tea, or variety?
I'll take the variety.
Here you are.
Thank you.
Okay. Patty Zimmerman reads variety, take one.
Hi. Today I'm going to read Variety. For those of you who don't know what Variety is the sort of industry organ of the motion picture industry. For those of you who've never read it, let me tell you what kinds of things it combines. It's like the National Enquirer and the New York Post married the Wall Street Journal. And what they came up with was an industry organ about the industry. Now, one thing you need to know about Variety is that it doesn't treat movies as semiotic events, as art, as aesthetic forms, as psychoanalytic constructions, as feminist film, as independent film, or as political film. It treats film as money. One thing you need to know about how the industry is treated in Variety is that it treats particularly Hollywood film as the American conqueror of all third world countries, in fact, of all regions in America. In fact, there are many military motifs. The most famous one right now is the title here, which says, Pirates Overwhelm Latin Home Vid. Two things that are in Variety most often than anything are people and money. Some of the people we meet in this week's issue are Frank and Di, who are referred to in kind of family terms. Frank is Frank Sinatra, and Di is Diana Ross, and they were just at Radio City Music Hall. Now, one thing about Variety, and practically all mass media, is that it is a very contradictory experience to participate in. On one level, it's an industry, and it shows the film industry to be an industry of international domination by American products of all other countries. On the other hand, it's a really good kind of thing to read if you want to investigate the industry, because it's full of self-disclosure of the industry's agenda, of their motives, and how much money everyone makes. Now, one other thing you need to know about Variety is that it started in 1905, which is a significant year in film history. It's the first year of the Nickelodeons, which were the first storefront kind of places where films were shown rather than peeped at. And what we find is at that time in American history, 20% of all Americans went to the movies. So Variety starts at a time of incredible industrial expansion of the movie industry. Now, what I'd like to talk about just a little bit is how the media, particularly Variety, this industry organ, familializes the way it talks about the industry. That is, it turns the whole Hollywood film industry into a happy family. Frank and Di are two of my heroes and heroines here. But in addition to that, there's a whole kind of language that Variety uses that you can barely understand. And some of these words include BO, Unspool, Vid, U, UK Pix, Lens, Aussie, and you'll see them during the break. Another thing about this familialism is there's just a little article in here about husband and wife teams that go to film markets to sell various kinds of films. And this is seen as really a terrific kind of thing, because what it allows the industry to do is to have the husband selling the film while the wife markets the publicity for it. In addition, another part of this family aspect, and this is why we're sitting on a plane, is that we have the New York to LA column here. This tells us which of our friends in Hollywood are in New York in transit to LA and which ones are in LA in transit to New York. It's important that the industry know where everybody is. Now, in addition to this familializing thing, there's also another way of looking at Variety, and that is looking at how it monitors our homes. One thing that this issue of Variety and many of the issues in the recent months have been looking at is the home video pirates, who are seen as damaging the industry because they're making illegal prints. Now, when you read Variety, you find out this home taping isn't happening just in the United States. It's happening in Mexico, in Panama, in France. And you'll notice that all the raids by industry people or government people of pirated video happen outside U.S. borders. There was a pirate video ring in Paris that was nabbed just a couple weeks ago because they had illegal prints of Two of a Kind. Now, there is one industry spokesman in this particular issue who's the president of NATO, the National Association of Theater Owners, who says that home video is actually helping the movie industry because it's making us produce more films for the market and stimulating sales. Now, let's talk about what kind of movie reviews we get in this particular magazine called called Variety. The one thing I like about Variety is that the reviews show us that two things. One, that film is a business, and let's not forget that it makes a lot of money in the United States. And secondly, that we should evaluate films based on their market value, that they're commodities that basically generate lots of surplus value for the industries that produce them. This week, for example, there's a review of a film called Greystoke, The Legend of Tarzan, Lord of the Apes. And the subtext says here, jungle action is the ape man's strongest suit. And what they say here, actually, is that they tell us why the film is going to make a lot of money. And let's just read a little excerpt here just to see how blatant some of the ideological manipulations are. With the exception of the warm, slightly batty Richardson, nearly all the Englishmen on view are impossible, offensive snobs, and the main thrust of the second half consists of the umpteenth revisionist put down of the titled upper class in order to provide justification for Tarzan's ultimate rejection of his blood heritage. Another example is Ice Pirates, a very crummy film, and the reviewer says quick before it melts. There's several other examples here of the way films are discussed in Variety in terms of money. Let me just see if I can find it here. We're seeing here that, oh no, where is it? Here we go. The 50 top grossing films. What I wanted to point out is that there are only 50 films on the Variety list, and the top 3 are all films that, as a film historian, I would consider terrible. Splash, Footloose, and Against All Odds. And again, let's talk about the media money metaphors, and let's just say what Splash is referred to as. This is Variety talk. This is no splash. It's a tidal wave with another 1 million on the way for its second round at 73 pools. Those are exhibitors. After the opener, which also hit 1 million in the first week. And with that, let me just add that on our next segment, we'll be talking about labor in Variety. This time, I think I'm going to talk about variety and labor and runaway production. One thing that I think that's really interesting about Variety is how it monitors labor relations in the motion picture industry. In this particular issue, there are articles on DGA, the Directors Guild of America, SAG, the Screen Actors Guild, SEG, the Screen Extras Guild. And what we basically learn from these articles are the various negotiations that the film industry is going through with these various film laborers. And as we've been talking about through this whole show, of course it has an international scope. The industry seems to be extremely worried in regards to these tiny little articles we find about international labor relations. Three really interesting little articles that I think illustrate how nervous the industry gets about labor relations are this. In Sydney, Australia, there's some people are building the Victoria Art Center, and the workers, the blue-collar laborers who are building this, are demanding a lifetime pass to all events that are being will be produced in this facility. And the industry responds in Variety with extreme nervousness that they might have to grant lifetime passes for them to see operas that cost $150 a seat. And then, of course, there's also 2 other articles on basic technicians unions in other parts of the world. They're very nervous about Mexican cinema workers because there are a lot of Hispanic films produced in Spanish for the Hispanic market in Mexico, and this would boost the price of those commodities should they be imported into the United States. There's also an incredible article here about what's called the UK union looms, meaning that there's some talk in the United Kingdom and Britain that the laborers there in the film industry may join into one big union, and the industry is very nervous about this. What's even more interesting, though, besides the labor question, is the whole fear and controversy in the industry right now, as we see laid bare in this issue of Variety, about what's termed runaway production. The idea that somehow no longer are we producing films in Hollywood, we're producing them in the hinterlands of Minnesota, Jamaica, the Third World, and even in New York City. And there are numerous articles talking about this, some kind of licking up the amount of money that's being put into these productions, and the other aspect is really talking about the various kinds of deals that are being made. For example, many people outside of Southern California, it seems, want to have movies made there because of the amount of money making movies generates. There are lots of jobs and there's lots of disposable income spent on drinking and restaurants. In this particular issue of Variety, we find out that the New York State has just set up an advisory board for the films to be made in this state. We also find out that Houston is going to produce the largest soundstage in the world with the help of the Exxon Corporation. We also find out that Prime Minister Siega, who ousted the socialist government in Jamaica, is trying to make Jamaica the largest film producer in the world outside of the United States. We also find out that the Marriott hotels, for example, are going to offer multi-locations around the country for people to shoot there. Now, what I think is interesting about this is that the industry, as presented in Variety, is very, very open about its fears and trepidations about what's termed runaway production. Of course, it's talked about only in regard to generating money and jobs and reducing the impact of Hollywood. Now, it could be that runaway production could give us different kinds of locations and different kinds of sensibilities in films, but here it seems that all of this runaway production is merely dispersing Hollywood style to all different parts of the globe. Now, something else that's interesting about this is if you read the tiny little articles in between the lines here, or if you read the top grosser section and look at item number 49, you find out that the industry, rather than disliking independent film, actually has a little tiny interest in independent film. And I went through here and did a sort of content analysis of how the industry seems to talk about independent films, films made outside of the Hollywood system with some kind of political content or subversive style. We find out that Seeing Red is number 49. Seeing Red, of course, a new film by Julia Reichart that chronicles the Communist Party, is number 49 on the grossers. It's also said that it's grossing a lot of money in New York, and it's caught the industry's interest not because it's about communists, but because it is a communist film that makes money. We also find out in a little insert about a women's film festival in France and the various kinds of films they're showing, and the articles point out that most of the films seem to come from Germany. We find out about an independent film called Musical Passage about Soviet directors. We also find out that at the Frisco Film Fest of '84 in San Francisco, that there'll be several independent films shown, and that at several German festivals there'll be independent films shown in what's termed provocative booking, because these, of course, are films that do not take the Variety or Hollywood party line. I just wanted to mention that what I think is interesting here is that Hollywood is not really saying that these films are a threat to them. They're merely trying to see how the film industry in general seems to be able to generate money. And of course, these independent films are interesting because they seem to crop up at various industry propaganda events like film festivals. let me take this. What we're going to talk about now is just zero in a little more on how Hollywood, and particularly Variety, dominates the third world with American-produced films. This particular issue is subtitled "The Ninth Focus on Latin American and U.S. Hispanic Markets." In light of the current problems or controversies or revolutions, depending on your point of view, in Central America, I think what Variety has to say about Central America is particularly interesting. This follows, in fact, the whole ideology of Variety. It's a great way to follow world news and world history. For example, all world news and world history is filtered through Variety in terms of its effect on the movies. And before we talk about Central America, let's just give you one hilarious example and actually horrible example from a Muslim community. In this particular issue, it talks about a community of Muslims who prohibit women from going to the films. And if you're a woman and you go to the movies, you're fined $10. If you're a man who goes to the movies and finds a woman who's going to the movies, you then get $5 for nabbing her and preventing her from going to the cinema. In terms of Latin America, though, what we find is that the Hollywood domination of third world, and particularly Latin American and Central American markets, is discussed in the most militarized kind of terminology. We are given the Latin American film markets in summary of countries such as Argentina, Bolivia, Brazil, Central America, and we're told what countries are included in Central America, and they are Panama, Nicaragua, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Costa Rica, and Belize, Chile, Colombia, Dominican Republic, Ecuador, and Mexico. It's also referred to here as the Central American Briefing. Again, notice the military terminology. And what we find out from this particular article is that the people who live in Central America don't consider themselves Central Americas. And what we also find out is how Hollywood assesses the market here for American films. For example, we find out that in Central America, Panama is worth 80% of the total of box office receipts generated in that particular region. We find out that because there's a dollar shortage in El Salvador, that only 30% of the market is penetrated. And what they say here, I think, is interesting. They say about El Salvador and its relation to Hollywood films, despite the unrest, which is variety ease for revolution, biz is brisk. Dollars are available on the black market at about 4 colones. So in case you want to go to the movies, what they're basically telling you to do is to buy black market dollars so you can go and see E.T. Flashdance or Return of the Jedi. Something interesting is that they say that Nicaragua is the best country in the region because it has high attendance and generates a lot of coin, which is variety ease for money. Tickets are cheap in Nicaragua, they say. They only cost $1.50, but the problem is that the government sets a quota on how much money each company can make, so this may kind of decrease your earnings. Other interesting kinds of facts we find out about Hollywood's domination of Central America, which is kind of parallels U.S. domination of the region, is that we find out that the region that we are told we should rethink how we think of Central America. And what we find here is, for example, and this is a quote from Variety, though the usual concept of third world poverty and banana republic politics, and that's a direct quote, and economics may hold true for some of the nations, a country such as Costa Rica, for example, defies all pat generalizations and cliches. And here Variety tells us a little bit about the sociology of Costa Rica so that we can generate many more dollars for American-produced films. We find out that its population is almost entirely European, not mixed with other ethnic groups such as Indians, blacks, or mestizos, so it's a kind of pure population. Its economy, until very recently, robust, and its politics as democratic as can be. We also have a little summary of Bolivia, and it says film going can be complicated in Bolivia because in the last 10 years there's been a succession of various military generals and other people taking over the government, and this has somehow made the movie industry extremely complicated. And then we also find out that one reason Panama is a really good place, besides being affiliated heavily with American interests through the canal, we find out that Panama is good because it's the Hong Kong. In other words, it's the place of kind of excessive capitalist activity in the third world. It says that one problem may be, though, that a lot of the financial activity in Panama has indeed moved to Miami. Now, The other thing that I find fascinating about Variety is how we can find out just how heavy the American penetration by Hollywood-produced product is of Third World and particularly Central American products. In fact, Variety tells us exactly just how much this has been penetrated. It says almost all films released are Yank product, and Yank is Variety-ese for United States, which runs with subtitles as everywhere else in Latin America. There is only a tiny amount of European product, mostly dubbed into English. One hardtop, the Presidente, shows hardcore, referring to pornography. This just gives you some example of how important the Spanish-speaking market is for Hollywood. We have here the United States Hispanic population. We have the top 30 cities in the United States and the percentages in those cities of Hispanics. This is important because any films that manage to get produced in these third world countries in Spanish can be also exported to the United States for Latin and Chicano markets. Okay, let's look at what the top Hollywood-produced films are in Brazil and how they're dominating the Brazilian market. E.T., Gandhi, Flashdance, Tootsie, Deep Throat, and Superman 3 are the top 6 films in Brazil. Another example would be Colombia, where E.T. and Gandhi, Firefox and Octopussy, and An Officer and a Gentleman are the top 5 films dominating that market, all American-produced blockbusters. And another example would be Flashdance, which is dominating Venezuela.
Ladies and gentlemen, just letting y'all know that our new destination is going to be Managua, Nicaragua. Have a nice day, y'all.